All right, everyone. The Big 12 has left Frisco, Texas, but we have not left the Big 12 here at the Voice of College Football. Big 12 Media Days, Tuesday and Wednesday, but here we go on a Thursday, a Friday with more coverage from the Big 12, and then on even into Saturday with a look at the Utah Utes. So we appreciate you stopping by. Leave those comments and questions there in the chat. We are here to talk college football with you. We got so many exciting things to pass along. The Big Ten Live Show is back, and the relaunch debuts in just a couple weeks with Corey Brada from the Hawkeye of the Storm and myself every Tuesday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. We just got our credentials approved for the Big Ten Media Day, so we will be there in a few weeks, and a lot of good things going on. We've got a watch party for you members coming up Monday, and that is July 14th. That's our next Monday showing up. If you joined us for last month, we got this month, we got August, Vintage Classic Games watch party, and then we dive into the season. And of course, we do the watch parties after each college football weekend. But we're talking Big 12, and we've got our guy, Cody Stovall, checking in from All Day OK State there on Locked On. Cody, how's it going today?
You know what, man? It's that time of the season where everybody gets to be hopeful, and that's precisely where I'm at. I'm very hopeful about this season, and I'm pretty excited to see what the Big 12 is capable of.
Yes, this is when you have to be hopeful, and why not be hopeful? Because there's nothing to be down about yet that actually has transpired on the field. But we're
all undefeated right now, Mark.
All undefeated.
That's right.
All undefeated, and why not be hopeful? Except for, man, by all indications, it could be another rough one. I will say this. Up until last year, I thought death, taxes, Mike Gundy at least going like 8-4 every year. That was pretty much a given that regardless of what kind of recruiting classes he had, he was going to be able to put that thing together and compete for the Big 12 championship. But, and I know we've gone over this a few different times here, and you've probably gone over it about 3,700 times. Rushing champion coming back from 2023, 21 starters, a veteran quarterback. And again, 21 starters, good Lord, from a team that went to the Big 12 championship game, and then they lose all 9. And I was just giving it a look once again. They only had 2 one-score losses. The rest of them were blowouts. And it's just kind of crazy what happened last year. And it doesn't look like they've brought in any kind of familiar names to right the situation.
Well, I mean, I guess that depends on what you consider to be familiar. Todd Grantham, the new defensive coordinator, is very familiar to SEC country. He had successful stints at Mississippi State before taking over at Florida. Now, the third and Grantham thing was always the kerfuffle with Todd Grantham. First and second down, from an SEC perspective, he was like leading the league in tackles for loss. He was top 3 in sacks, but third down was a problem. I do think that whenever you bring guys in like Mordecai McDaniel from Florida, J.K. Johnson from LSU, and Brian McCoy coming over from Akron, Shanavian Bradley coming over from Tennessee, I do feel like that we have definitely filled a lot of gaps. Now, the biggest thing to me is going to be the coaches, right? Of course, everyone's going to talk about the players, and I'm assuming that's what you were insinuating was we didn't bring any big name transfers in. But I think the coaching in and of itself is going to reap a lot of benefits for this upcoming football season. We do have 65 new players, so it's going to be an adjustment. But at the same point in time, we coordinated everything from rookie minicamp, OTAs, just like the NFL, all the way down to the roster spots. You're hearing from the players that the technical aspect of the coaching is extremely advanced compared to what we've been getting the last couple of years. And then you bring in Doug Meacham, right? Doug Meacham was part of the Justin Blackman, Brandon Whedon offenses. He was part of the Trayvon Boykin, TCU offenses. And he had a heavy hand in their last 4 recruiting classes. So I do think that we've brought some names in, but maybe not some traditional starters from other places.
Yeah, absolutely. When you go the coordinator route, Todd Grantham and Doug Meacham, they both have long tenures at big-time schools and have done some good things, no doubt about that. And Doug Meacham, as you said, Oklahoma State ties and, of course, TCU ties, and have done really great things with those offenses in the Big 12. My first thought when I was talking about no big names, I was thinking, I don't know that there's a quarterback situation in the country that is as anonymous as this Oklahoma State situation with Zane Flores and Haas Hedgney. These guys haven't played at all.
Well, I mean, Haas Haney did spell Josh Hoover last season as a running threat. He had a couple of 100 yards rushing. He only attempted one pass. So it is going to be very new, obviously. And Zane Flores was Mr. Nebraska Player of the Year. He's still the all-time leader in passing yards for the state of Nebraska. 6'3", 220 pounds. Somebody that filled in as a running back this last spring whenever we had some injuries. So this is two individuals that have a lot of running capabilities that I think is going to be very reminiscent of what the Oklahoma State offenses look like with J.W. Walsh and Clint Shelf. You've heard the age-old adage, right? If you have two quarterbacks, you have none. I don't exactly agree with that. I know Mike Gundy is of that old school mindset that if you have two quarterbacks, then you have zero. But I do think this year is going to be a little bit different, primarily because of the numerical advantages a running quarterback offers. So no matter who wins the job, Haas Haney is going to factor into this equation because whenever you have a quarterback that's faster than most wide receivers in the country running a 10-600 meter, that is going to numerically give you an advantage. Plus, you have Zane Flores, who probably was one of the biggest regrets for Nebraska fans, the fact that they allowed him to get out of the state of Nebraska. As soon as they hired Matt Rule, that was one of their number one priorities, was try to convince Zane to stay in Nebraska. And he was injured last year, right? We had a lot of turmoil last year at the quarterback position between Alan Bowman and the Garrett Rangel, and the Garrett Rangel gets hurt, and we don't have the ability to turn to Zane Flores. But I think that some of the the unseen could be beneficial because you alluded to it in the intro. We had 21 returning starters, almost 90% of the roster that just played for a Big 12 title against Texas, and it amounted to nothing. I think what you could see very evidently was the complacency that caused. Ollie Gordon got his money, but he also made sure that all the offensive linemen got paid, and I think at the end of the day, that ended up being a bad move. This is all going to be a new offensive line, but I think that's partially why there's some excitement in Stillwater.
All right, Cody, all those are really logical football breakdowns, and we usually love that. But I'm going to say for right now, let's throw that all out the door. I'm going to say that your best argument is that last season, the media picked Arizona State last, and they won the Big 12. The year before, they picked West Virginia last, and they finished 9-4. Now, I know that there was no media poll, but if you pick up any magazine in America or look at any website that's making Big 12 predictions, they pretty much have Oklahoma State last. I'm looking at a Lindy's. I'm looking at all sorts of other publications. I think Phil Steele has Oklahoma State 14th or 15th. So maybe your best logic is just to say, if everyone is counting somebody down in the Big 12, then they're the money play.
So you're saying there's the chance. Mark, you're 100% spot on. Arizona State just proved that this league, the bipolar nature of the Big 12, allows a lot of teams to have the ability to make a run here at the end of the season. And I think Oklahoma State is going to be no different, right? Primarily because of this transfer portal era and getting down to the 105 roster limitations. I do think that the days of you having the Blue Bloods control every single conference every single year are going to become more few and far between, because I think the roster limitation is the biggest factor. Oklahoma State's going to be no different than anybody else. There's definitely a handful of players that were going to be factored into the fall roster that we are no longer allowed to rely on because they entered the transfer portal. And I think you're going to see that synonymous across college football, nowhere more so than the Big 12. You mentioned earlier how we didn't have a lot of one-score losses. But at the same point in time, I do think that that's something that sets Oklahoma State up for a redemption tour. You mentioned it, Mike Gundy. Death, taxes, 7-8 wins is traditionally where we always find ourselves within. And I think that people are overlooking that. Now, I've had my druthers to say about Mike Gundy over the years. There's been moments that I thought maybe his seat should have been a little hotter, but I don't think this season's one of them, primarily because of the fact that he did fire all of the coaches and hire all of the coaches. I think that showed that Mike Gundy understands that there is a new lay of the land in college football, and he had to make some adjustments, and I'm very happy that he definitely did that.
Got our guy Cody Stovall stopping by from Locked On All Day OK State. I know that you're there every day cranking it up on Locked On, so just let people know where they can find you.
Yeah, Locked On Oklahoma State. You can catch me essentially daily throughout the week for sure. And then my X is at All Day O State if you want to go check me out on there. Pretty exciting times, Mark. I'm not going to lie to you, buddy. The idea that Utah, because of Kyle Whittingham, is being projected as a top 4 pretty synonymously in this league. And Mike Gundy is being projected as a bottom 4 when they have the identical record. I think Mike Gundy has like one more bowl win or one more overall win than Kyle Whittingham. I do find it slightly ironic that they win 5 games, but everybody's saying, well, because of Kyle Whittingham, Utah's going to be back. Yet they're not affording the same thing to Mike Gundy in Oklahoma State. Again, I've had some issues with Mike Gundy over the years. I thought there was times that his seat was a little too comfortable, but after he rebuilt the entire staff and is a willing participant in the NIL era, like Mark, we're paying legitimate money for this roster that we've assembled this season. So this is going to be a good case study for Mike Gundy. He's never done this. He's never done the entire, roster being transfers thing before. But we've seen it has worked at times. Mel Tucker, before he got ran out of Dodge, did something miraculous with Michigan State with a full transfer roster. Florida State a couple years ago was 13-1 with a full transfer roster. I understand that there's some bad mixed in there as well. You look back to Florida State this previous season, but I think it all comes down to the culture that you have and the training that you're getting. The culture in Stiller has always been pretty good. That's been something that's helped us retain talent. But now you're seeing an uptick in coaching. Mike Gundy has never, hey, this, Mark. Mike Gundy hires people that he thinks are going to be around for 4, 5, 6 years. So he typically goes and gets to the gym that not everybody in the country is going after. The fact that we're paying head coach money for a defensive coordinator that came recommended likely by Nick Saban and Todd Grantham, I think that does show that Mike Gundy realizes he's going to take more of a CEO role and let the coaches do what they're supposed to do. Less micromanagement within the roster and more management of obtaining new talent, I think, is the direction that Mike Gundy's going. And all of that leads me to believe that he understands this season is absolutely massive.
And Cody, of course, the defense in 2023 wasn't largely the reason why the team made the Big 12 championship game, but they were opportunistic for sure. And they were really strong in spots when they needed to be. Now, last year, number 125 in the nation in scoring defense. So as Grantham said, I'm tearing things up, a new approach, new format, new scheme, all of it.
Yeah, all of it. We're running more of an NFL system. And I think that might be the biggest difficulty for this defense is, are they going to be able to dial down all of the nuances that come with this, right? With a more advanced level of defense, you're going to have multiple checks, multiple shifts, multiple audibles off of one single play call. So it's going to be up to the team to be able to disseminate the information, have enough communication to get in and out of checks fast enough to counter the offense. I don't know that the complexity of this defense is going to allow us to show that very early. But I do think as the season progresses, you'll see more and more of that understanding. And as we all know, all that matters is you get yourself to the dance. If you get yourself with the opportunity to get to the CFP, that's when you can make some magical things happen. So what we look like in the first few weeks is going to be drastically different than what we look like in the last few weeks. And I think that's because of the complexity of this system. But if they do get it down, there's far more speed on this roster than potentially any time ever before, right? And I did an episode about that, how many players we have on this roster with 10-5, 10-4, 10-6, 100-meter times. It's something that we traditionally didn't get. And Mike Gundy did hint at this yesterday, Big 12 Media Days, when he mentioned the new staff. They're from the SEC country. Everybody on this defensive staff, they've all come from the Southeastern Conference or the NFL, and they've all had multiple stops together over the last 8 to 10 years. So I think that continuity and the aggressiveness that they're approaching the recruiting realm is because of where they came from, which is entirely new. Mike Gundy likes to go with the safe guys that he can mold into the Oklahoma State system. These are guys that are coming in with their own system, their own dudes, their own recruiting methods, and you're seeing it pay off right now in Stillwater, Oklahoma. Once we were able to kind of up the NIL budget, I do think that you're seeing that pay dividends right now. It's just going to be a matter of, is it going to be applicable on the field?
So, Cody, you referenced Big 12 Media Days. That's why we're here talking to you and a ton of people from the Big 12 this week. And so if anyone out there does what I do on a more than daily basis, every few hours, does a college football search in terms of college football news on Google just to see what's out there, can't miss anything. Deion Sanders is obviously the guy that takes center stage at Big 12 Media Days, and he says anything, and that's all you see when you do a Google search. I'm like, can I find anything else that anybody else said? But Deion made a comment about, of course, needing a salary cap And he's not the first one to have uttered this in any such way. But once he did, it's like it's a revolutionary thought. I'm going to throw it out to you in regards to not just Dion, but the entire conference outside of Oklahoma State. Anything that caught your ear this week that you thought was meaningful?
Well, I think Brett Yormark's comments about the 5 and 11 methodology is something that, we're making a bunch of hill of beans about, which I don't necessarily see beneficial one way or the other. The biggest thing I will say about some of the Brett Yormark comments is, in order for the Big 12 to position themselves as the next in the upper echelon of the conferences, I think at the end of the day, we've got to do something with it, right? People don't remember that TCU beat Michigan because of what happened to them in the national championship game, just like people aren't going to remember that Arizona State largely controlled that entire second half and put themselves in a position to win, but they didn't win, right? So people are remembering. And then when you date back all the way to OU, not to throw shade at OU, but that was the perception of the Big 12. OU would make these massive moments, BCS games, national championship games, Final Four style equations, and they would lose. So the perception of the Big 12 always was what OU was, which is a team that's good enough to get anywhere, but they're not a team good enough to win it when it matters. That has lingered with us without OU even in the conference, and we haven't exactly helped ourselves over the last few years. So I think I speak for most of Oklahoma State country. We're at a portion where we just want the Big 12 to continuously be successful. So we just need somebody to kick the door down. I don't care if it's one team that gets in. There's also some talk about, Brett Yormark says we're going to get 2 teams in. I think that's kind of a crazy statement. Again, because we have not put ourselves in a position to prove it. If TCU wins the national championship, probably a different story. If Arizona State beats Texas next year, probably a different story. But I feel like we're still on the outside looking in, and the Big 12 is not going to get enough respect until we kick somebody in the throat repeatedly and earn that respect. And it's got to come in football, right?
Yeah.
I mean, how many people remember that Houston just played for a national championship in basketball? Not all that many, because they lost to an SEC school. So that's the dominating conversation. Once again, we have to do things about this. So some of Brett Yormark's statements were a little wild in my perspective, but he's doing his job, and I appreciate that, because Bowlesby did not.
He is doing his job, because I'm sure his approach to the job would be much different if he was hired as commissioner in the Big Ten or the SEC.
Oh, yeah.
He could play it close to the vest, be conservative, just, hey, do the job, and you've got the upper hand. But man, he's got to get innovative, which he has, and I'm sure will continue to be. He's got to, throw the punches like a puncher's chance kind of guy. And I don't think that the guy has taken too many missteps. He says things that I don't agree with, but I understand why he says them. I just disagree with him because I think he's covering up the obvious, but that's his job. Again, I totally understand his approach to the job. And we could wrestle back and forth all day about 5+11 versus 4-4-2-2-1-3, and which is going to serve the Big 12 better. I do think that from a public perception standpoint, it's almost impossible for him to go out there and say, yeah, I'm campaigning for the 4-4-2-2 model because what? You're basically conceding that your conference is half as good as the other 2 conferences.
Yeah.
So I just think that's a losing proposition publicly. And again, while we can argue all day which one's going to give the Big 12 more opportunity, obviously the 4-4-2-2 guarantees the second spot. So it's the safer route. I just don't think he could publicly say that, because it makes your league look inferior because you're conceding half the spots already.
I actually hadn't thought of it from that angle, but that's why you are the master of all trades. So, yeah, I think that's actually a very good point. And I'll tell you what, Mark, Brett Yormark has not missed the mark very often whatsoever. I think one of the few instances of that are, A, the lack of rivalries, right? The fact that we're leaning on the Holy War and Farmageddon, with Farmageddon having years of in-between moments where they're not playing. It's a problem, in my personal opinion. But the biggest one is, stop giving these other conferences good ideas, right? Because when he talks about the third-party proprietary, percentage, he's the one who put that out there. And people from other conferences were like, that's just the Big 12 proving that they're desperate. And then we didn't do anything about it. Now other conferences are doing it. And the naming rights stuff, right? He was the first one to bring up being the All-State Big 12 or the Dr. Pepper Big 12. Did I love it? No. But now other places are starting to talk about doing the same things. So my only complaint right now with Brett Yormark is, Stop giving these other conferences ideas if you're not going to implement them and you're going to let them steal them anyways, because I think that you're taking apart some of the benefits of being at the forefront. I have no doubt Brett Yormark has other things up his sleeve, but it is getting slightly frustrating that he makes a statement and people around the country say, well, that's crazy. Why would the Big 12 do that? And then other conferences do precisely what he said he was thinking about doing, and we're still not doing it. That's my biggest complaint with Brett so far.
Yeah, and I got to think that, and I got to admit, I took a few shots at that idea because it seemed kind of gimmicky, but at the same time, I'm not in his position trying to, lift this conference in regards to perception. And also, I think things that were gimmicky years ago, as we continue to evolve in regards to marketing and so forth, are not gimmicky anymore. And I think that'll continue to be the case. So having an all-state Big 12 conference or Dr. Pepper Big 12 conference, once the initial few days of kind of pot shots are taken on social media, it wears off and you got money in the bank is what you've got.
Yeah. I will admit the lackluster big time comments have been kind of, not fun, right? We're used to Mike Gundy raising the bar, or at least some coach saying something at Big 12 Media Days that you said that just kind of goes viral. It clips. Last year, Mike Gundy went viral for saying, I think we've all driven 1,000 times while drinking beers. So I was hoping for one of those moments this year out of somebody. It didn't even necessarily have to be Mike Gundy, but that seemingly hasn't happened yet.
And Cody, I'm curious about your comment about the rivalries. So when you say the Big 12 is not capitalized on rivalries, are you talking about in terms of scheduling? Because not everyone can play everyone.
Right. But you have to be able to, in my personal opinion, you have to be able to pinpoint things that should be rivalries or could be rivalries and try to foster that as a relationship, right? Naturally, Texas Tech should be our biggest rival, but we didn't play them last year. We do play them this year, right? So maybe that'll build something up. But as it pertains to last season, we didn't play Texas Tech. I thought that was a little bit of a miss, but we did play Utah, right? And there was a lot of animosity between Oklahoma State and Utah fans building up to the season. And now we don't play Utah this year. So I do feel like that across the Big 12, there's instances where they can build rivals. Cincinnati, West Virginia, right? That old Big East thing. Maybe that should be part of this conversation. There needs to be more rivalries in the Big 12, and I do think that it's up to him to help foster some of those because they're not going to be natural, right? Most of the rivalries that we build in the new Big 12 are not going to be traditional rivalries, but you have to be able to foster that in order to have yourself a game on that rivalry weekend that's impactful, because right now we're leaning on the Holy War, and that's it. TCU, Baylor, they play sometimes, but it's not going to be every year. Farmageddon, they're going to have years where they break that up, and I don't agree with that. If you have your Holy War, you have Farmageddon, maybe find 2 or 3 more rivalries that you can build and make those games that are pretty regularly played.
Yeah, you partially answered my question, but Iowa State, Kansas State is not going to be played every year?
No.
Okay. That's a problem. Yeah, I think you've
got... they don't play next year. They obviously opened the season this year in Ireland, but they're not playing next year. I think they play again in 2028, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, I think you've got to identify the rivalries, and they have to play every year just like they do in the other conferences. I think that's just obvious.
Yeah, and again, like if we're going to pass around that the Big 12 is the most fun conference to watch because top to bottom, 16 can beat 1, 2 can beat 15. It's the only conference that can really say that. I agree with that. But at some point in time, you have to have flag bearers, even if it's just for perception purposes. Because right now, the perception of the Big 12 is, well, yeah, they're all talented, but they're going to eat each other up. So none of them is going to have enough success at the end of the season. I do think that eventually you have to have a team that they know is always going to be in the top 10. Whether it's Oklahoma State or BYU or Utah or Houston, I don't give 13 hoots who it is. Of course, I want it to be us. But just for the Big 12's sake, we have to have somebody eventually kind of pick up that flag. And I think in order to build that, you have to do it through rivalries, right? That Texas running through the SEC, it means a lot, but the Red River rivalry still is up there at the very, very top of the rivalry weekend stuff for that conference. So if the SEC's understandingly taking rivalries and using them in promotional and marketing to build the conference up, that is the one thing that we're probably not utilizing to do the same. Because right now, the only thing we have to prop up other than Farmageddon, is the Holy War. And I just don't know that that's a sustainable model for a decade from now.
Yeah, I think you need to work with, or the Big 12 needs to work with, the core of the Big 12. Kansas State, Iowa State, Oklahoma State, Texas Tech, Baylor, TCU, the core of the Big 12. And that's where the rivalries, sure, the Holy War is awesome and it needs to be continued, of course.
Right, for sure.
But they need to look at the core of the Big 12. Who identifies the Big 12? Who is identified with the Big 12? Well, it's Kansas State and Oklahoma State and the teams I just mentioned. That's what people still think of when they think the Big 12 and the heart of the Big 12. And you can't break up rivalries there.
Well, and I tell you, right now is the perfect time to incorporate a little bit of an added rivalry because Texas Tech is playing with a massive bullseye. When you're spending Texas, Miami, Texas A&M level money, you're going to put a target on your back, right? When you have the number 2 overall recruiting or transfer class in America, you have a top tier recruiting class. Everyone's going to want to beat Texas Tech now, right? Because it's the same reason you always wanted to beat Texas. It's because they have all of the money. They have all of the facilities. They have all of the benefits to playing college football. To beat Texas for a long time, it was because you were a blue-collar team that was willing to work harder. They had all the fancy stuff while you were willing to work harder. I think a lot of that is changed because of NIL, because of the transfer portal era. So you have to have new ways to put yourself at the forefront. Fostering these rivalries is a big deal. And right now, everybody's going to hate Texas Tech. Everybody is going to circle that game on their roster, and they're going to say, well, you can't let the $40 million team beat us because – if we do that, then they're never going to go away, right? And that's true. If Texas Tech goes like 12-1, 11-2, then this is going to become a problem every single year for every team in the Big 12. So we have to be on a mission to try to prevent Texas Tech from overtaking everything.
I'm scrambling, Cody, to see if Texas Tech is playing Colorado this year.
I'm not sure. I know we play them in Lubbock. They're towards the end of the season.
Texas Tech does not play Colorado. I would think that would be a good game to schedule this year as well.
See, we're missing out on rivalries, man.
They need us to schedule the conference. And one last thing I'll say before we get our next guest in here, and Cody, and let you get on with your day, is the other angle to the rivalry argument is when you schedule the games. And I'm not going to say or pretend that I've got the answer to this because I've not done the research or thought about it long enough. But the one thing I've noticed about the Big 12 since this change of adding and subtracting OU and Texas and then the other teams coming in is it seems like in terms of scheduling, they're just throwing darts at a board. Like the final weekend of the season is not what you see in the other conferences. Ohio State, Michigan, Purdue, Indiana, Minnesota, Wisconsin. You can just line them up in the other conferences.
Yeah.
It's a rivalry weekend. In the Big 12, it's like Utah's playing UCF, and there's no rhyme or reason to anyone playing. And I got to admit, I'm not too critical of it from this standpoint. Like I said, I like to have things well thought out. So I'm like, okay, are they just choosing not to try to contend with all those huge matchups everywhere else and just saying, you know what, we'll play our Kansas State, Iowa State games and our games, our Holy War in other weeks so that they get more attention because we don't want to go up against Alabama and Auburn and those other games? Or I got to think that that's the thought process. Otherwise, there's no thought process to it.
Well, your guess is as good as mine on that one, Mark. It honestly is the biggest head scratcher that's come out of Brett Yormark thus far is just that, not being able to foster these rivalries. Because, 95% of the time it was Bedlam. That was the Big 12 game on rivalry weekend because Red River's always, the earlier part of the season. So more often than not, and OU-OSU was the last game of the season for most of my entire lifetime. That was the big game. And from a marketing viewership number-wise, it always did very, very well. So, yeah, we're missing out on that. Whether it be Oklahoma State versus Texas Tech or Utah versus somebody else. I don't really care what the new rivalries are, but we have to start fostering some of these new things just to kind of help us more with perception and marketability because marketability is visibility and profitability.
Cody Stovall, All Day OK State. It's on lockdown. You've got all the information right there to keep track of Cody and all that he does. Cody, I'm hoping Mike Gundy gets you a couple wins in the Big 12 this year. And obviously there's that trip to Eugene, Oregon that could be interesting in week 2.
You know what, man? I think that Oregon is replacing the same number of people we are, right? So it's obviously for different reasons, and they have more of a factory, and they have some individuals like Sadiq that should be absolutely phenomenal. I think that them going and getting Mekhi Hughes, a running back out of Tulane, is going to be huge for them. Getting Barry Alexander from USC is big. But I will say this, for all of the questions that surround Oklahoma State's quarterback play, if you watch that Oregon spring game and you watch what Dante Moore did at UCLA, I don't know that he'd make the Oklahoma State starting roster, buddy.
Yeah, if he continues that, he'll have a few pick sixes for you.
Yeah.
He kind of majored on that. All right, Cody,
Yes,
appreciate you being here. Good to see you, man.
Yes, sir. I appreciate you.
All right, let's keep it rolling here at the Voice of College Football, covering Big 12 Media Days. We're going to talk some K-State. We got Tim Fitzgerald stopping by for a first time here at the Voice of College Football. Tim, good to see you.
Looks like I got the wrong camera working here. Get fixed here. How are you doing, sir?
It is looking good from here. You can catch Tim, everyone, at Power Cat 247 Sports. Very familiar brand here. So, Tim.
Okay. Well, it's not going to let me switch my camera or my microphone, so I guess
it's all good. It's all good. We can see you. We can hear you. We got the purple in the background. It's just all Wildcats, so that's a good thing. You know, with the topsy-turvy nature of the Big 12, it's the most unpredictable conference. I think that's pretty well established, that if you're just looking for a good game on Saturday afternoon and you just want to watch a close game, you're going to tune to a Big 12 game if you're not just kind of randomly searching for a game. But if there's one thing and one program, though, if I was going to choose a team year in, year out to peg as a contender, this would be the program that seems to always be in contention.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was just thinking about that, by the way, that you could say that about Oklahoma State and Utah until last year. And I think that's what hurt the Big 12 as much as anything, when those brands that people around the country kind of know stink. Well, then the whole conference has got to stink. And I think that's what happened a little bit last year. And of course, Arizona State coming out of nowhere made it look like it's easy to win the Big 12, which it absolutely is not easy, because there's not many give-me wins on the schedule.
Tim, when we look at K-State, and then we'll broaden out to the rest of the conference, Avery Johnson's a very athletic guy, arguably the most athletic at his position across the country. He's got a few years under his belt. Your thoughts about what he needs to do to be a more consistent quarterback?
Yeah, because that was he had plenty of good plays, but the bad ones hopped out at you. And look, physically, he's a different young man. Seeing him a year ago at this event, and then seeing him the other day down in Frisco, it was kind of shocking. Even though I see him in between, having that point of reference, he is much bigger, much faster, which says a lot than he has been. And everyone says he has matured greatly as a quarterback. You got to remember, last year he was a true sophomore who had started one game, that being the bowl game of his true freshman year. Heading into the season, and he had a lot of lessons to be learned. And if he didn't learn from them, it's going to be a long season. But I think he has, and he showed in the bowl game after making another bad pass, a bad decision where to put the ball, and he bounced back in the second half and played tremendously well.
And then, of course, at running back, DJ Giddens was one of the most fun guys to watch. Down to down, but Dylan Edwards, when given the opportunity, popped off for 7.5 yards a carry. So he's the lead back, I see.
Be interested to see what the transition is for Dylan from touching the ball, 5 times a game, which is what he did in the regular season, to the kind of load he carried in the bowl game, where, again, he was really effective both as a runner and a pass catcher. He brings a lot of different tools to the field, the DJ, and he's not a typical between the tackles type of runner, although he can do that. That'll be the biggest change in K-State's offense. If Dylan Edwards is the primary ball carrier, how they carry the ball is going to probably be more to the edge, just simply because DJ Giddens is an NFL build between the tackles type of guy that makes things happen. And you can do that with Dylan Edwards, but boy, he's got to slip through a crease and then use his speed. He's not going to run over anyone. So that'll be an interesting thing to see. Or do they actually use backup Joe Jackson a little bit more because of his ability to do the things DJ did, and contrast those two with each other? That's going to be a big question heading into the season.
And Tim, is this a caliber offensive line that we're expecting to be one of the better units at K-State?
They needed to fix it. They went out and got a slew of transfers. They had 2 in spring football. One, George Fitzpatrick from Ohio State, locked down left tackle immediately, so that helped them tremendously. They've added a couple more here in that spring window, and they feel like those guys brought the depth that they really needed. Now they really have some competition heading into fall camp. They got a lot of experience because of the portal, and some other key guys coming back, including some young guys. So Chris Kleiman told me on Tuesday they have more depth there than they have in the last few years, and hopefully can get to a true 8 or 9-man rotation to cover all 10 spots in a 2 deep.
Austin Romaine's back as the top tackler, also a VJ Payne, top 2 tacklers on the team. But then after that, it thins out quite a bit in regards to the experience coming back. Your thoughts about K-State holding up on the defensive side?
Yeah, those are 2 tremendous players at their own layers. Austin Romaine is probably the best middle linebacker in the Big 12, if not college football. That's what PFF has him at, if you want to believe that. But then, BJ Payne on the back end, another guy who is noticeably bigger, stronger, faster. He looks like an outside linebacker now as a safety. And yet when they put the catapult devices on the players, he ran the fastest of anyone on the team at 23.3 miles per hour. So that's an incredible combination of speed and size, and we'll see how that plays out at safety. But like I said, he could slide up to play linebacker or be a man cover corner too. He's a really flexible athlete, and they're incredibly deep and young at defensive end. And if I was a fan just watching, I'd keep an eye on those defensive ends who emerges to be the next guy.
All right. I don't know if you caught the back end of our conversation with Cody Stovall. We started to obviously kind of break into the Big 12, which I find to be the most intriguing league if you're just not just talking about on-field results being unpredictable, but talking about the trajectory of the league, the moves being made by the league. They're in a similar spot as the ACC in terms of a lot of the national perception. But where I differentiate it is that the ACC has those upper tier programs, Clemson, Florida State, Miami in particular, which if they scoot, the league could just implode here in the next 5 to 7 years, whereas the Big 12 seems to have fortified itself and is here for the long haul. Now, how relevant they are nationally, as a college football purist, I don't want anything to happen to the Big 12. I don't want anything to happen to any of these conferences. But Brett Yormark does appear to be, even if some people may not agree with every move or everything that comes out of his mouth, to be a good fit for a league that needs to be innovative.
I agree. And also brings that, street fighter, I'm going to get in here and bloody my knuckles a little bit and scrap with the big boys. And I think the Big 12 needed that after, frankly, being the victim of raid after raid. Now, you bring up the entire brand discussion. The Big 12 has been inoculated with 3 different raids on brands out of this conference. And because of that, they've been able to build up, the secondary brands, but they do need to make a breakthrough in perception. They desperately needed an Arizona State to win that game last year. They need whomever gets to the playoff this year to win. Being competitive isn't enough because Arizona State was more than competitive with Texas. They just need to change kind of the perception more than the reality, because there's some really good football programs and teams in the Big 12. And Brett Yormark brings the right amount of intensity, and he's savvy enough to understand that how important that television contract was a few years ago that the Pac-12 just didn't grasp. And that was the entire difference in survival and collapse.
And as you well know, Tim, unfortunately, when you get less swings at it, then it's kind of tougher to pull through.
Yep.
When the Big Ten and the SEC are going to get 4 teams in, 3 of them can fail, and everybody's just going to remember if one of them rises to the top and gets to a national championship game, whereas an Arizona State can show up And sure, nerds like me are going to remember 10 years from now, Arizona State should have won that game. They were just as good as Texas on that day, but most people aren't like us. They remember who won the final score. And unfortunately, with less swings, that's going to be kind of difficult.
Yeah. Right now for the Big 12, it'd be incredible to win a national championship. Amazing. Probably not within reach because of the process right now. And to go with that, you need to climb up the ladder, which, for me is just win that first game and go play a second game. Stick around. And once you stick around, people start to remember you a little bit more, including recruits. And you just got to raise your national exposure. And we've seen it happen in our lifetimes with maybe a Clemson or Virginia Tech that's risen up. K-State at one point in the late 20th century had arrived at a national scale and couldn't keep it going for long enough. So it's possible. And I'll say this: the 12, maybe 16 team playoff offers more access for the Big 12 to win those games, to get on the stage, because nobody remembered who the 10th best team was a few years ago. But if you're the 10th best team and you're seated that way and you go beat a higher seeded team, people are going to remember you in the future. So there's actually something here to really benefit the Big 12 with this new playoff structure.
So, Tim, unless you have a convicted position on this playoff format, I know that somebody could throw me the 5-11 and I could argue that in the Big 12's favor, and somebody else could throw me the 4-4-2-2-1-3 and I could argue that. It's you can go through all sorts of models of what's happened in the past, but we don't have much to go on because the leagues were different to really say, oh, well, history would tell us that this would favor the Big 12 or that would favor the Big 12. I just think that Brett Yormark can't publicly say we want the 4-4-2-2-1-3 because that's an obvious deference to we're not as good as the other two.
Got it. You nailed it. That's 100% for me. That's what it is. He's not going to go to the table and admit that the value of his football conference is half that of the SEC and Big Ten. That isn't just perception. That might get to play into media rights and the amount of money you get if you're admitting that. I think he knows there's risk involved, but I think he also feels safe that at 16 teams, the Big 12 is going to consistently get 2 in. You're going to get the champion in guaranteed, and surely one other would have. I would think BYU would have been in if last year had been 16. And I do believe that's really what it's at play here. He can't admit being a lesser conference from the very start. And I agree with him on that. But the risk involved in that, as Greg Sankey honestly openly says, he wants to, cook the system in favor of the SEC because they're better and everyone knows it. Look, SEC is the best college football conference. So let's play the seasons and prove who the best teams are. And that's really, at the end of the day, the 4-4-2-2 thing was rewarding people for past performances unrelated to what actually happens in that season. And maybe I don't see it happening anytime soon, but maybe the SEC just has a really bad season. They just aren't very good. They maybe have 2 dominant teams and the rest don't look like normal SEC teams, but they get 4 in. I have some problems with that. It should really be based on that. And maybe that works out in favor of the SEC more often than not. But I think we should be worried about what teams are doing that season, not in previous seasons.
I am right there with you. I have serious issues with it. When we start a football season and before one down has been played, we say this conference gets 4, this conference gets 4, and the other 2 get 2. No, let them play the games. And if those 2 conferences are that good, absolutely. And we've trusted this committee, and I'm not a big committee guy. That's not the way I would do it, but we have gone with this committee for 11 years, and I don't see any egregious issues with the selections they've made. So if we're trusting them to do it, and they haven't really screwed it up, then if we're going to go that route, then why don't we trust them with selecting the 11 most deserving teams that earned those spots?
I agree. And as long as that committee is going to be a diverse selection of the eligible programs, represented in that, I'm fine with it. I want to make sure the algorithm doesn't get cooked, whatever the computer system they're leaning on. Doesn't again, when you start talking strength of schedule, I'm like, oh, great, that's fine. I don't care if you lose to a good team or a bad team, you lost. If you want to talk strength of schedule, let's talk about the teams you beat and how good they are, because that's really what's important. And then if it's tight, we can look at who else you played. But as an overall measurement of how good you are by figuring out who you lost to and how good they are, that doesn't add up for me. Let's figure out who you beat and how good those teams are as your strength of schedule.
Tim Fitzgerald joining us. Go Power Cat 247 Sports. Tim, I want to respect your time, but I got one other thing for you. I'm going to throw Deion Sanders out there because, and before I let you go on this topic, he just intrigues me from this standpoint. He is completely unique in college football in this way. Whether you say Nick Saban, Joe Paterno, Urban Meyer, whatever great legendary coach, they became a brand based on what they achieved in the sport. This guy was a celebrity when he showed up and will always be a celebrity based on what he did on the field, and then became a TV personality. So he has become, he's his own brand. He's his own man. He doesn't have to play by everybody else's rules, whether to a certain extent, whether you like that or not. And now Colorado, without being that great a football team, now they have obviously had two exciting players this past season, had the 10 best TV ratings games in the conference. They every time they step on the field, people watch them. Now, is that good for the Big 12? Because the Big 12 doesn't have an elite team, so I guess they might as well have a celebrity team.
That's it. That's exactly it. Viewership's viewership. It still counts the same way. But if you're a college football fan, that's a little more casual. And I'm sorry, you are if you're flipping around to watch Deion Sanders coach. You're not that rabid about things, about who the really good teams are and want to watch them. Although Colorado, and this helped a lot, turned into a pretty darn good football team by season's end. And this season will be huge for that because people will burn out on that. But this entire thing is about Deion, and being at a school, up in the Rocky Mountains like Colorado helps, but when it's all attached to him, when he leaves, he's taking the fame and fortune with him. So Colorado knows they need to hang on to him. And Deion Sanders isn't just good for the Big 12. He's very good for the Big 12. He has been absolutely brilliant for the University of Colorado outside of athletics. Enrollment's up, ticket sales are up, giving's up. Everything is turned in Colorado's favor by hiring the celebrity football coach. It's insanity, but it's truly marketing through your athletic department, and it's been brilliantly executed at Colorado. I enjoy Coach Prime. I like someone who will say the outlandish thing, particularly when it's outlandish by college football standards, but it's not outlandish in reality. And he'll say some things like, yeah, that's exactly it. Nobody else is saying it, but you can go with that, particularly with how, to treat players and their compensation and those type of things. And he's just a larger than life personality. Some of the stuff he does from the podium is just insane, but fun. And we sometimes forget that this should be fun too.
Tim, if I may pop one other thing at you before you leave, because this just popped into my head since I got a Kansas State guy here. Bill Snyder and what he achieved, I do not think it gets the credit that it deserves all time, because, we can roll out the national championships of the guys I just named and others, and that's all amazing. But anybody out there that's in the chat, maybe you weren't around in the 90s and in the 2000s, go back and look at Kansas State's records prior to Bill Snyder. It's just unbelievable what he accomplished at Kansas State.
I wish I could remember this. It's like the program had 4 winning seasons for like 50 years.
Yeah.
It was the first program to ever lose 500 games. The choice when they fired Stan Parrish, who had won a national championship at Marshall and failed miserably at Kansas State, and then won a D1 national championship at Michigan and has a Super Bowl ring too. So go figure that out. The only place he couldn't win was Kansas State. And they decided to hire one more football coach before they dropped to the Missouri Valley, got rid of football and just played basketball. That was the choice, Mark. Do we keep doing this or hire one more guy? The one more guy was Bill Snyder. and they got that right. And simultaneously, they had some big donors step forward and say, we're going to help the facilities. Everything was bad. I mean, I hear stories about the equipment staff sorting out socks, and starters were getting socks with holes in them because they couldn't afford socks. The program was just, there's no comparison in the power level of what the program was like. None. And on top of that, we're at 115 to then 105 scholarships, so less talent was trickling down. And what he did took him 5 years to get to a bowl game, and he did. And then he proceeded to win 10 or 11 games, I think 5 out of 6 seasons, and including 98 when they really should have played for the national championship. They just had a horrible break in the title game and lost that, and dropped all the way to the 5th place bowl for the Big 12. And it's one of those things where they were so close. They were on the cusp. I think clearly they're the best team in 98. They just had a disaster strike. And you know what? You can't go back and replicate it, but boy, it seems it's harder on a school like Kansas State to get there now than it was then. And that seems odd to say. But Bill Snyder used a cheat code called recruiting junior college players, which was unsavory and frowned upon. And then everyone started doing it. And now, of course, the whole landscape of college football has changed, and JUCO recruiting isn't nearly what it was. He always figured that angle, including developing a player that walked on, 2 players that walked on from Riley, Kansas, population, I don't know, 4,000. And Jordy Nelson and John Riley went on to be NFL All-Pro guys. So it's been incredible to watch what he did. And now the program is sustained, the donor base is there, and it's an amazing thing. It's a legitimate big time program. The facilities are really amazing for a school of 20,000 students.
Yeah, I keep a spreadsheet where I've got like records during the CFP era and the 21st century and since 1970 and all these different benchmarks. Kansas State was so bad that even with Bill Snyder finishing in the top 10, like 10 out of 11 years and doing all the great things that he did, and it's been probably the best program in the conference over the last 20, 25 years, probably, with the other 2 leaving. They still have the worst record in the Big 12 in history, even after all this success, because you look at those records just prior to Bill Snyder, it's like 1-10, 1-10, 2-9, 3-8, 1-10. It's unbelievable how bad they were. It's incredible.
Every time they got a little taste of good, K-State would literally screw it up. There was a coach in the 50s named Bill Meek who got them going, got two like around 500 seasons, which is huge news in Manhattan, Kansas. And he went and asked the president for a little more money to pay assistant coaches. And the president literally said, what do I get from football that I can't get from just tilling up your field and turning it into ag? I mean, it was like, yeah, you really aren't seeing the big picture here. Yeah. And, really that's K-State came out of World War II and wanted to stay with the whole, just recruit the kids off your campus to be on your teams. And everyone else started recruiting grown men that had served the United States military. And that's really when the awfulness came into full picture for Kansas State and getting dominated by Oklahoma and Nebraska and others that were filled literally playing men against boys.
Yeah, it being the 1950s, he really wasn't seeing the big picture. There was something called television that was emerging that was going to completely change everything.
Yeah, it did. It did. Hey, can I add something here?
Sure.
I caught the end of your call with Cody, and I loved it, talking about the rivalry games. And you nailed it. The Big 12 seems to schedule with the dartboard. None of it makes sense to me. Kansas State, Iowa State, Farmageddon is a big enough game where they wanted to move it to Ireland this year. It's been, believe it's the 4th longest standing consecutive game in college football. And the Big 12 has decided they're just not going to play in 27. I mean, one of the things with realignment that has been so bad is we lost so many rivalries. To voluntarily quit one makes no sense when rivalries, particularly, like the Holy War, Utah, BYU, those rivalries are what really drives big numbers. And then the Big 12 doesn't really do much with the rivalries they do have. They just kind of throw them on the schedule. It just doesn't make sense. I think the Big 12 should have a rivalry of the week, not a rivalry week, because spread them out over the year to try to impact your ratings, but at least honor the ones you have. And there's rivalries that go beyond state borders because that's all they protected. They just protected KU, K-State, those type of things, Arizona State. And you know what? There's bigger things out there too. You've got other rivalries that can be built up. I heard you mention Tech, Colorado. Well, Tech, Arizona goes back in history as a rivalry, and they haven't renewed that. They don't do a very good job of making sure the rivals are all on there and the schedules feel a little bit more familiar to the fan base.
Yeah. Tim Fitzgerald, Go Power Cat at 247 Sports. Is there anything in particular, Tim, that you want people to know about?
We're just plugging away. We just got back from Media Day. We have a lot of coverage up there. Podcast went up, and we're kind of in that July, everyone's itching for it, and it's not quite here moment. So I'm thinking off on vacation. So if anyone wants to keep updated on that, that'll be exciting.
There we go. Hey, Tim, it was a pleasure. Appreciate you stopping by. It'd be great to have you back sometime.
Anytime you need me, brother.
Awesome. Thanks, Tim. Have a great day. I so much enjoy having college football conversations with people that have insight and perspective and know what they're talking about. It's a good thing. So we do appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football, and do appreciate both Cody and Tim stopping by to give perspective on some teams we probably don't hit on enough. The Big 12 with Oklahoma State and Kansas State. And like I started off that conversation with the comment, if I had one program to select in the Big 12 that I had to hang my hat on year after year after year after year to be in contention for the conference championship, it would be Kansas State. What Bill Snyder established, we can't give him enough credit. Chris Kleiman has taken the torch and he has extended that. Now they've got problems and they've got issues and they got to fix things. And it's not like they had a sterling season in the Big 12 last year at 5-4, but 9-4 with another bowl win out of Kansas State. And again, as Tim and I were discussing there at the end, a huge game for the Big 12, both in regards to perception and notoriety and exposure, but also in terms of league standings, most likely when they go to Dublin on week 0 and it's Kansas State taking on Iowa State. So I am so much looking forward to that game. Do appreciate everyone being here at the Voice of College Football. We get together every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, every day during the week, 4 p.m. Eastern time. And then look at this. In just a couple weeks from now, we are relaunching the Big Ten Live Show. It is back on Tuesdays at 6 p.m. Eastern time. I believe we will do our first one the week of Big Ten Media Days, and we may possibly need to have a fill-in host for Corey that week. I'm trying to think who that might be. I'll figure it out. The initials MH come to mind. Possibly. I don't know. I just had a premonition. So Corey and myself every Tuesday at 6 p.m. Eastern time, starting late July, but we intend on doing our first one, Big Ten Media Week there in Vegas. All right. I'm actually off to have a little bit of fun, a little bit of dinner, a little bit of time with friends. How about that? We'll be back on Thursday, and a number of things that we've decided to do here is that we got a watch party coming up. We'll do that on Monday night. So that is Monday, July 14th, I believe. We'll do it Monday night. Will be the Rose Bowl of 2024, Michigan, Alabama. That'll be our next watch party for July. Also, if we could replace this laptop that knocks the logo off the screen like every 4 seconds, that would be tremendous. But that's like laptop. We're going third line on the depth chart. This is our third string laptop. So this is all it needs to do is keep the logo up there. And it's on its last leg, possibly. Regardless, the watch party's coming up on Monday night, the Rose Bowl of 2024, Michigan, Alabama. We also I was thinking about doing this tomorrow, but I've got a meeting at 3, and then we also have some Big 12 guests at 4 p.m. Eastern time. My thought was I'm going to go live at noon, and we're going to start reviewing every national championship 2024, going all the way back through history, and I'll stay on as long as I can stand it, but we will have to reserve that for another time. But our national championship reset is coming, and that's going to be a live stream that's going to last forever or have multiple parts to it. And then also our program rankings. And some of you were saying, Mark, you mention this every day and you've been doing it for 2 months and you have yet to deliver. This is true. But let's understand, I have delivered every off season on all of these topics, so I will not miss this season. All right. We had a great show on the Miami channel last night with Miami and Florida State. James Coleman, our guest, along with Cam Underwood, of course, from State of the U. So check that out on the Miami channel. That was a phenomenal breakdown on Miami and Florida State. And again, I'll be back here at 4 p.m. Eastern on Thursday. And come to think of it, the previous week on the Miami channel, that was a great breakdown. Notre Dame, Miami, with Brian Driscoll stopping by from Irish Breakdown. So the Miami channel is the place to be, but not the place to be on the Voice of College Football, but it's one of the places to be. And I will check the chat one last time to see if anybody's stirring anything up of consequence. Thank you for that, Jackson. Appreciate you jumping right to it. I make mention of a show, and within about 3.8 seconds, Jackson has posted the link. So there we go. Jackson is all over that one. Good to see. Moose, thank you for that. Moose has posted the link to the book. It's Disputed National Champions. It's a good little read. You will have no problem getting this in before the season kicks off. So you're not going to miss any football reading my book. You will just get yourself primed to watch the 2025 season. Disputed National Champions. You can grab the link in the description section of all the videos here, or you could just go to Amazon and search Disputed National Champions. Moose, thank you for reminding me of that. Some people have asked me to write a 1980s edition or a 2000s edition, and I would love to do that. This is all we need to do is sell about 4,000 of these, and that will not even pay me a penny. That will just give me to break even. We can sell about 4,000 of these. That will get me to break even, and then I'll invest in another edition. Fortunately, with this was maybe stupid of me, or maybe it was forward thinking, that the deal that I cut enables me to write future books for like a fraction of the cost going forward. So that's the reason we invested in this one. So again, Disputed National Champions, give it a look. It's only $9.99. Don't take it from me, but take it from everyone who's read it and posted their reviews that it's worth the read. All right, folks, see you on Thursday, 4 p.m. Eastern time. Thanks for being here at the Voice of College Football.